Food is fuel for your body, your mind, and definitely your sport. But let's face it, nutrition is confusing, and the expectations on girls and women to be thin and have a six-pack are exhausting. If you've ever been frustrated with your body, confused about nutrition, obsessed with eating healthy, or guilty when you don't, underate, overate, or overtrained, and overwhelmed with all the pressure, then this podcast is for you. Nutrition can be easy. You can take control of it, but it might start with letting go of control by asking for help and making a change. I'm Lindsay Elizabeth Cortez, sports dietitian and owner of Rise Up Nutrition, where I empower female athletes to overcome nutrition concerns and perform at their highest level, to stop being confused by all the mixed or harmful messages, and finally have confidence in your body as a fierce, fit, and fueled female athlete. Hey everybody, before we jump into this episode, I want you to know that from time to time, I will label a podcast episode as explicit. And this might be because I drop a swear word here and there, which is pretty rare, but more so, I actually might label an episode as explicit if we are on the topic of eating disorders or disordered eating. Specifically in today's episode, my wonderful guest shares a really honest story of her journey with an eating disorder. And in it, we do discuss some behaviors that could be triggering for some listeners. So that's why there's an explicit rating on this episode. And I want you to know that neither myself nor my guests condone or encourage these behaviors. In fact, it's quite the opposite. We are raising awareness and talking about them so that you can identify that this is unhealthy and that this does need help and treatment, and that there is help and treatment for these behaviors, that you don't have to go on living this way. But again, here is your fair warning that we do talk about some of those disordered eating behaviors. And if you might be sensitive to it and maybe listening to this episode isn't for you, that is perfectly fine. And I hope that you can enjoy many of our other episodes on this podcast where we don't talk about these behaviors. But if you have decided that listening is for you, wonderful, and we hope you enjoy. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Female Athlete Nutrition Podcast. I'm really excited to have Meg McCabe as my guest today. Megan is a CCI certified eating disorder recovery coach and life coach based in Denver, Colorado. She's the founder of the Radiant Recovery Collective and the host of the Full and Thriving podcast. She helps clients from all over the world break free from food obsession and live a life that's present, lighthearted, and meaningful. Meg has been a great person in my life over the past year. We've really just connected, and we've been following each other mostly through social media, and we've been able to collaborate on quite a few things. And she's just been such a light in this world, and I know she's doing amazing work with her clients. So we really want to highlight her on the show today. Meg, welcome to the show.
Lindsay, thank you so much for having me. It is a true pleasure to be here and to be able to talk to your audience. It's always such a great time getting to connect with you. So thank you again for having me.
Yeah, of course. So I want to kick us off with giving you time for you to share your story. Obviously, as an eating disorder recovery coach, I'm sure you have a bit of your own story with this, and I've heard bits and pieces of it before, and I'd love for you to share it with our audience as to why you got into eating disorder recovery coaching in the first place.
Well, thank you. It's always such a treat to be able to share my own story. As you know, as a podcast host myself, I'm always highlighting other people's stories. So it's so nice to be able to share mine on your platform. So thank you. My eating disorder journey started in high school, like many of us. It was a really tough time for me in high school because I never felt like I really fit in necessarily. I felt very awkward. I felt like in middle school, it's kind of bottom of the totem pole. And then in high school, I felt like no guys ever wanted to date me. And I had an identical twin and I felt like nobody could tell us apart. I still have an identical twin, but I felt like no one could tell us apart. So I had no real identity separate from her. And so high school kind of kicked off very uncomfortably and awkwardly for me. And let's see, during that time, I, tried really hard to feel beautiful. Like I just wanted to feel like I was attractive to my peers, probably for some social climb. Like, I don't really, you know what I mean? Like, it was kind of like, oh, dieting is a way where I can lose weight and people compliment me and I can look cute in clothes. And so during that time, America's Next Top Model was really popular. I don't know if you ever watched that show, but
I did.
it
Yeah.
was really triggering. And
Oh, so triggering and also very, very popular because I wasn't somebody who was into those shows, but like everybody knew of that show. It was so popular.
yes, and I was obsessed with that show. And what they would do during the episodes would be measure the girl's height and weight and like chest, stomach, and chest, waist, and like hip measurements. They would just publish those on every episode, like all of these models. And being a tall girl, I'm like 5'11. I was comparing myself directly to what I saw in that show. So soon enough, I started measuring myself. I started exercising a lot without properly nourishing myself. And it just became something where I was striving for that model body because I am, well, privileged in a way where I do have a naturally thin body. So for me, I felt like it was very obtainable, which is like weird. I feel like, so I was like, I could be one of them. I could be a model. So it just became this obsessive thing. And then the compliments kept coming in. I started getting very like into fashion and the modeling world. And soon enough, I actually ended up getting a modeling contract. I don't know if you knew that. So I moved to New York City after college and had this modeling contract with one of the top agencies in the world, which was super cool and exciting. But, unbeknownst to everyone around me, I had developed anorexia and also ended up kind of developing bulimia as well, because sometimes we all have a mix of different diagnoses within our own eating disorder umbrella. So during that time, even though I ended up kind of achieving this modeling dream, and getting to that body size that felt like would open so many doors for me, I ended up having this awful backstory and nobody knew about it. So I was really suffering. And so that didn't last a while. I mean, if one thing I learned really quickly was that body size for me was not sustainable. Like, I'm actually very naturally athletically built. I have a lot of natural muscle tone and like broader shoulders. And I'm just like kind of built like an athlete. And so being that runway thin where they told me I wasn't allowed to work out during that time because they didn't want me putting on muscle.
Wow.
Isn't that crazy? So I just turned into this shell of a person living in New York City, going to castings, withering away, throwing up my food, restricting. And finally, when I had my first fashion week, it was like kind of crazy, but during my first fashion week, they sent me to get a facial. And it was kind of a blessing in disguise because the facialist burned my face.
Oh my goodness.
So I couldn't go to any castings or book any shows. And as a teenager, I had no idea of like the long term or no sense of patience. So this was a tragedy to me. I was like, I'm not going to book anything. And this is the make or break season for me. So it turned into the spiral where I was trying to maintain this really thin size, hardly eating anything. And then once that happened, I let go of control and started binging and rapidly gaining weight because I couldn't maintain that really undernourished body size. My body was really trying to get me to restore weight fast. So soon enough, I outgrew the clothing sizes that models back in that time needed to be. and I moved home and didn't know that I was quitting modeling for good at that point, but I moved home to start my own recovery journey. And in that process, quickly realized I had to let go of being in that toxic environment and really focus on healing my relationship with food, healing my body image, healing my relationship with exercise, and just being a normal human again instead of this model that some people can become models and not worry about dieting. And actually, they're born with that body type. But for me, it was not possible. So that's wow. I went into that.
It was so great, Meg. Thank you so much. And so many things that you highlighted. And one thing I want to point out right now is just how interesting it is that, like, you know, when you were in high school, you were saying like you wanted your own identity, like you almost like couldn't find it. You didn't want to be normal, quote unquote, you know, be just like your sister. You had to find this way for yourself. But then, like years later, you're trying to find your way back to normal. How do I have a normal relationship with my body? How do I have a normal relationship with eating? And it's interesting because I have this conversation with my clients a lot, Meg, this fear of normalcy. I think a lot of people have a fear of like, well, if I let go of being the healthy one, or if I let go of being the skinny one, or if I let go of being the athletic one, or the girl with the six pack, or whatever it might be, then I might just be normal. And that's like scary to some people. And I'm sure as you were leaving New York City, like you said, you didn't know that you were really leaving modeling for good, but like I'm sure it must have been scary to think of like being normal at the same time you were craving it at that time.
Mm-hmm. It's amazing that you bring that up because I feel like my entire life, even beyond my eating disorder, has been trying to escape this sense of normalcy and then retreating back to it. It's been this weird ebb and flow of like, I don't want to be normal. I want to be glamorous. I want to be special. I want to be different. And then going to extreme measures to do that. And then retreating back and saying, wait, I want to be normal. I want to be safe. I want to just get back on the right path. You know, I realize it feels like I'm always taking risks and then finding my way back. And obviously with, an eating disorder, it was good that I went back to that normal. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That actually being normal is, I think, something that just like as humans, we kind of all crave. We want it's safety, it's security, it's happiness. And I think, you know, okay, I'm taking all these big, bold moves and I'm not normal per se, but I'm also not happy. Like that's not a good place to be.
Yeah, exactly. I was living my dream life, but definitely not fully happy. I mean, I would just go home and cry. I felt like I was missing out on so much. My peers were going to college, they had kind of normal relationships with food. And here I was obsessively worrying about food all the time, developed bulimia, worrying about my size. It was just, I don't know. It's a tough time, but I'm so thankful that I went through that period of my life because you develop life lessons and wisdom and skills when you go through recovery that you keep throughout your life. So I'm really thankful, even though it was difficult. I'm glad that I did not hold on to my eating disorder for very long.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, in letting go of it, you're able to move forward and it's a part of you, it's a part of your story, you know, but it doesn't define who you are and moving forward for the rest of your life. Yeah. So many other things about your story are really interesting though. You know, I think that piece that you said about, well, I am, you know, I am a taller individual and I, you know, have sort of a bit of a thinner frame, a thinner body and privileged with that. So it was like this goal of becoming a model was so reachable.
Yeah, is that
It was
weird?
really interesting. Yes. But I think a lot of people can resonate with that also in sometimes like kind of tying into striving to not be normal because we're trying to like be something, maybe that other people say, oh, you could be a model, or you would be a great athlete, or you could do this. And so it's like we feel like just because we could, we should. Or, because you had the height and this frame, well, I should be doing this. And I think it's just such a life lesson to realize just because I could doesn't mean I should, or doesn't mean it's right for me, doesn't make me happy, or isn't healthy for me.
Yeah. And I could get there. And it's kind of interesting because when people have these body goals, sometimes it's like you could get there, but it's not sustainable and it's not going to last. And what do you have to sacrifice in order to get there anyway? Like, so for me, I sacrificed basically my entire mental space. I was obsessed with food and my body and my weight. And I sacrificed not going to college. I took a semester off from college. Not that that's a bad thing, but I was definitely putting all of my eggs in one basket, which was I must look this way so I can have this life that makes me feel different, like you were saying before.
It sure made you feel different, but didn't make you feel good.
No, did not make me feel good at all.
No, you and I have also talked a lot about, sports and athletics, because of course your story is a little bit different than some of my clients, being that the modeling industry brought you down a harmful path with eating, which is well known, I think, for most people, like to know that there's a lot of disordered eating and eating disorders in modeling. That's well known. But you yourself in high school, you were a high school athlete as well. And we've had some conversations about, because it started for you in high school. And so how do you think that your eating or lack of nutrition affected you as a high school athlete? And was that important to you at the time?
Yeah, such a good question. I was a swimmer in high school. It was the best part of high school. I loved the swim team. We were state champions. It was just so much camaraderie, all the pasta parties. I was varsity all 4 years. So I really loved being a swimmer. I did backstroke. I also did the IM race, which was so much fun. But unfortunately, I feel like I never saw my true potential. It was like an undernourished version of me competing for pretty much all of high school. I think about how I dropped the ball in a way because I was going to practice without having eaten lunch. Like I was just going to practice on an empty stomach, only caring about being thin. And back then, this was about 10, 12 years ago now, muscle gains culture wasn't really a thing. So I did not want to have any muscle mass on me, God forbid, especially if I wanted to do modeling. So I totally passed up the opportunity to do any extra training in the weight room where the true athletes were, where the true winners were going and putting in that time after practice to build their strength. I did not do that one day out of the entire 4 years of high school. And I ended up being an okay swimmer. Like I said, varsity 4 years. I placed in states 1 year for backstroke.
Wow.
But I always think, wow, I would have kicked ass if I had actually dedicated myself instead of been so obsessed with losing weight.
Yeah. And I think it's an important message to hear you say too, that was like the best part of high school for you, was being on the swim team. And, I also, one of my previous recorded podcast episodes, kind of goofy, but it was with my dad.
Aww,
and
I love that.
But yeah. And, we spoke about the importance of high school sports. He's a lover of high school sports. And, that was his encouragement for his daughters being athletes, was really just for the participation of high school sports, because it's like the last time in your life that you get to do like organized sports or like be on a team, unless you're going to be a pro athlete, which very few people get to do, and so even for you, who did, take your career in a totally different way, like, exploring the modeling, maybe athletics wasn't a huge part of your life, but even looking back in high school, like that was that was such a good memory for you, although a little bit tainted with our experiences of eating and being concerned about our weight and stuff like that. But I just want this message to get out to any young girls who are in high school and are resonating with Meg's story right now, to just really remember the importance of embracing high school sports and trying to just enjoy being in the moment, because years later you'll look back and say, well, that was a really good part of high school.
I loved it. It was the best part of high school. Like I said, the girls on the team were our lifelong friends. I probably messaged from someone from the swim team every other day, like between Instagram and my close friends who I kept for the next decade. I mean, that team meant so much to me and still does. And those memories were, even though there was there was an eating disorder looming in the background, sports meant so much to me. Even as a child, like very young kid, I went to I lived in a competitive district. So everyone just centered their lives around sports. And maybe it's because I didn't have a brother. I'm not sure why I didn't try to be super competitive in high school, but I still was. I kind of just took my athleticism for granted. Like the eating disorder went to such an extreme place that it kind of took me a long time to reconnect with exercise in a way where it wasn't connected to food,
Yeah, and this happens a lot, where an eating disorder and we can call it exercise disorder as well. They're so linked. They can be one and the same. They can be so linked. They can be so tied together. So Meg, did you have to stop exercise in order to find your own healing?
I did stop exercise probably for a few months. Not super intentionally, because I didn't have any I didn't have an exercise disorder, but I did stop exercise and just focus on healing my relationship with food. When my recovery went from very restrictive to very chaotic. So suddenly I was restoring a lot of weight. I was kind of binging and purging. So if you're stuck in a binging and purging cycle, exercise is really uncomfortable because you're oftentimes very nauseous. So I think I stopped exercising until that was kind of under control. So a few months of chaos there. And then I did reconnect with exercise to a point where I just would run outside because it was fun, or I would go to the pool because I wanted to relieve stress, or all the positive things that exercise does for you. I did end up reconnecting with it in that way. But it was probably a year or so where it was murky and it wasn't totally connected to my appearance.
Yeah. And I think, just like you highlighted too, there's the mental side of maybe stepping away from exercise for a short amount of time just to heal your relationship with food and to separate exercise from appearance. And then there's also the physical side of, one, can you exercise if you're underfueled, or on the other side of going back and forth between restriction or binging or purging. It's just such a physical toll on your body that you really need to give your body that time and space to make it feel better, because adding more stress, it's not going to feel good, and it's going to just add more stress to your whole physical system.
Yeah. And I completely agree. There are definitely people out there with eating disorders where we need to ask them to stop exercising for a few months so that they can heal their relationship with their body and food. And then later on, the exercise is reincorporated in a safer, less triggering way.
Yeah. Yeah. And this is a conversation I have so often, obviously, as working with athletes. It's hard to not have exercise be part of the picture, but I really wanted to highlight your part of the story and your experiences, and to just let people know why putting aside exercise could be so helpful in this journey for some. And it doesn't mean forever. It might even just mean temporarily, and it makes this process easier on your body. It might not be the answer for everybody, but for some people, it could be exactly what they need.
Absolutely. And it really does help with restoring your period too. Taking that break it's like your body needs that rest in order to restore the period. So if you're struggling with letting go of exercise, maybe think of the other health benefits that can come with it, just temporarily waiting to reincorporate that back into your life.
Absolutely. And I know it's personal, but I'm just curious, since you brought it up, would you mind sharing, was that part of your story as well, of losing some of your hormones and losing your menstrual cycle?
Yeah. Yes, I had no hormones in high school. I feel like I was just completely underweight, lost my period pretty much all 4 years. And the messed up thing was that my doctors just wrote it off. They were like, "Oh, you're an athlete, so this is totally normal and okay." And which is messed up. They didn't ask me if I had an eating disorder. They just assumed it was because I was over exercising in their eyes. So I did lose my period.
And I guess they thought that was okay in their eyes too, just because you were a swimmer.
Yeah, it was very messed up. So I did lose my period, and it also was very disordered because if I ever got it back, I would call my inner voice would call myself fat. And it became this really vicious thing where, and I'm sure a lot of people can relate to this, oh, this is a sign that I've gained weight and I'm like not as attractive anymore. So I need to revert back to whatever I was doing before so I can lose the weight again and not have my period. It's a messed up relationship with my period.
Thank you for being honest about that, because, I think I'm trying to create an environment, and a lot of other, like you are, so many strong females are out there trying to create this positive relationship with our menstrual cycles. But the honest truth is sometimes we might have that disordered thought in our head that's thinking, well, if a period means I'm healthy, like what does healthy mean? And well, if I didn't have my period because I was underweight, now I have my period, that means I've gained weight. And it just creates a spiral of negativity and doubt. And that's the disorder speaking, right?
Yes, it's absolutely disordered.
That is the disorder, like screaming at you. So it is a funny thing that we can experience, but I just want to encourage all of our listeners to remember, no matter how many times you have to tell yourself over and over and over again, as a female, you're supposed to have a period. You should have a period. Keep striving for that period. And if you have a voice telling you otherwise, that's the disorder.
It's totally the disorder. And unfortunately, I didn't have the tools that someone like you would present, or someone like me would present to our clients, how to argue with that eating disorder voice or challenge that eating disorder voice. I had nothing to say against it. It was so strong and dominant that's why I took those disordered actions. Because when you have those disordered thoughts, you just base your actions on those thoughts and keep going in that negative direction. So anyone out there who has lost their period, I just want to say that you need to make it a priority to get it back and surround yourself with, people like Lindsay who can really build up that healthy voice for you while it is probably weak on its own,
And people like you, right? So I would love to hear how, when you did find that peace with yourself, recovered yourself physically, mentally, emotionally, what was it that made you decide, let me help other people do the same?
Good question. So when I was going through the chaos of the eating disorder, even when I was living in New York, I knew I had an eating disorder. It was very clear to me that I had an eating disorder. And so in the back of my head, I knew back then that I was somehow going to help people through this one day, which is pretty amazing because I hadn't even helped myself through it. But I was like, this is going to be special to me. This is going to be something I help people through as well. So I had that in the back of my head. And it's very interesting because when I started college and I was in full-blown recovery mode, as in like actively working on my recovery freshman year of college, I turned to my freshman year boyfriend and told him that my dream was to help people recover from eating disorders as well. And several years went by and I forgot about that. Like I forgot. I think I had researched being a social worker or a therapist and didn't want to go to grad school. So I just let go of that dream. And then years later, when I reconnected with that ex, he was like, yeah, you said it's so cool to see what you're doing now because you said you wanted to help women heal from eating disorders. And it's cool to see that you're doing that. And I was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I actually wanted that. And I had forgotten and then reconnected to that part of me, which is interesting. So it wasn't my guiding light forever. I definitely got off the path. And then what brought me back to the path was after I graduated college, I worked in public health at a children's hospital. I was a health educator, which was very cool. I loved that job. But I got this entrepreneurial bug to become a life coach. I started looking into personal development and reading up on like Marie Forleo and all these cool life coaches and business coaches out there. So I ended up becoming certified as a life coach. And while I was building up my client base doing that on the side, I would lean on my recovery story to inspire people. So I would have these events. I actually ended up moving to New York City and living there, trying to get my life coaching business off the ground. And I would tell them about my recovery story and everyone would just listen. And it was like the room would just be so entranced by this story because they had never heard anyone talk about an eating disorder openly before. Like imagine a room of 40 women, like maybe this was maybe 6 years ago. There wasn't a ton of podcasts out there talking about this or anyone really talking about this. So they were just mind blown. They're like, wow. And I would do this whole life coaching lesson. And then the thing that they would remember was the eating disorder story. Because everyone has some sort of connection to diet culture, disordered eating.
Yeah, a room full of 40 women, I'm sure you resonated with more than half of them.
Yeah.
With that story, you know. I agree. So many, whether it is an eating disorder or just being sucked into diet culture or having insecurities about your body or what you're eating, like I think so many people can resonate with this. And so it's definitely makes sense that your life coaching business turned like shifted, you know, that's the story and that's the help that people really needed.
Yeah, it was
you.
pretty amazing. So I ended up attracting some eating disorder clients. That's not why they came to me, but we would end up working on it on the side, kind of just based on like my own wisdom of like what recovery was like for me. And then this was maybe like 5 years ago. I was still living in New York. And anyone here with a twin, did you know that twins have an increased rate of eating disorders? Like if you have a twin, you have a higher chance of getting an eating disorder. It's actually a risk factor.
Wow, I really did not know that. But judging by your personal story that you shared, I can see how mentally that desire to be different or create something different for yourself could happen.
And there's also a ton of comparisons like body size. So about 5-ish years ago, my sister was going through a breakup and she dropped a lot of weight, even though we were about the same size, recovered size. And then she dropped a lot of weight. And then one of my guy friends turned to me, I'd known him since high school, was like, wow, your sister Katie is like the thin twin now.
Oh my goodness.
It was like, oh my God, I thought I had healed all of this. And one comment just hurls me into wanting to lose weight again. So I ended up kind of like, it felt like I was a drug addict because I went to the pharmacy trying to find laxatives, and just trying to find a new way to lose weight fast. And so I went to the pharmacy a few times, ended up buying some laxatives on the third time and knowing what this was going to lead me towards. And I remember one day going to take them And I knew like deep down in my heart, this was a really bad idea. Like this could be a potential relapse or potential really disordered behavior that I could fall into. So I was kind of stricken up with this crossroads, and I ended up reaching out and texting my mom, which is really powerful because that's what I do as a coach now. I'm the person people text now as a coach. And also, it was powerful because during my first eating disorder, I kept that totally secret. I didn't tell my mom at all. So the fact that I was like 6 years older out of this eating disorder and I was trying to protect myself, I reached out to my mom for help. And she called me right away and convinced me not to take the laxatives. I got rid of them. And in that moment, I realized I need to make this be my career. Like I need to help people through their eating disorder recovery experience. I need to make this my niche with coaching. And it was kind of like my final test. Like I passed. Like I didn't I was tempted, and then saying no to that strengthened me and in my recovery and finalized my full recovery. And I was like, okay, I'm going to specialize. And that I think I actually decided to specialize to protect myself from ever going down that path again, which is pretty interesting. And I haven't had any like temptations for relapse or anything since that day. But yeah, then I just got certified with Carolyn Costin and went the whole route. I just went all in after that.
Yeah. I love, right, that we can admit that recovery, and quite frankly, just who we are as people in life, like it's not this linear process. It's not always let me, give it my first shot and then I'm done. We will get tested again. We will get tested. It doesn't mean that you'll fail. We might take a step back. We might take 2 steps back. I don't know, but like we will get tested again. And that experience for you years later, here you are cruising along, doing great. You're on your own. You're recovered. You are life coaching, and something happens where we get tested. And that's just such a powerful story though, Meg, of like being able to reach out, ask for help, being able to dig deep as to like, what would this mean for me? If I say no to this, what am I actually saying yes to? If I say no to these laxatives, I'm saying yes, not only to myself, my future, but to a career. And I just think that's so powerful. And I think for people to keep in mind that like we will be tested is important, but that doesn't mean that we'll have to deal with this for our whole lives.
Right, right. I think you will end up being tested in the strength of your recovery, but thankfully throughout recovery, you gain so much wisdom and tools and knowledge that you take with you day to day. And so if you are tested, you have so much more strength to choose recovery again than you may have when you first started. And even if you do relapse, it is part of the recovery journey. And it doesn't mean that you're going to be stuck forever. Every time you make a mistake in your own recovery process or you have a setback, you learn from that. And then you have the ability to move forward with new information and new knowledge about yourself and your own behaviors and what you need to get past that.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So now, as an eating disorder recovery coach for other people, would you share some information maybe just on how it works for our listeners who are just interested and really vibing with you right now, Meg? If they wanted to reach out to you, like what are some things that you could tell them about how you work with clients and obstacles that your clients face that you help them overcome.
Mm-hmm. So you're looking for kind of the process, what my coaching looks
Yeah.
like? Okay, cool. So thank you. It's very nice of you to ask. So I work with my clients one-on-one. Usually, I actually have a few ways to work with me, but if you're going to work with me one-on-one, the process is that you can sign up to work with me weekly or twice a week, depending on how intense your needs are. And every single session, you don't just show up and we talk. Like, it's a very constructive session. Usually I have something planned for you. And then at the end, we co-create your goals. So we create several goals related to your recovery. So you might have a food goal, like a food challenge. You might have a mindfulness goal, perhaps meditation, or challenging your eating disorder voice. Maybe you have a goal to cut back on exercise or not exercise. We create goals, all different goals for your unique process. It's really fun. And for some reason, I feel like that's my gift, is finding cool ways to challenge you throughout the week, and also different assignments you can do to strengthen your current set of needs, or like where you want to go, kind of to fine tune where you want to go. So every week you're getting those assignments, those challenges from me. You can stay in touch with me through texting or voice messaging. And also, one thing that I think is very unique that I offer is inclusive packages. So if your parents want to be involved, they can have sessions with me as well. So we can have family calls together. I also am willing to work with your dietitian and your therapist or anyone else on your recovery team. So it's a very comprehensive approach. And that's what I love about it, because I find I am kind of that liaison for the rest of your team. Like, you might go to your therapist and maybe you talk about your eating disorder with them once in a while, but there's so much other stuff that
Right. There's more things you can talk about in therapy.
Yeah. So I'm kind of the one who you see every week, who keeps you focused on that recovery goal. So that's been really cool. That's why I love working with clients and doing my one-on-one work. Yeah.
Yeah, it's amazing. And I love how you can be a part of, there might be other people involved, like you said, a dietitian or a therapist or a doctor, but you can be kind of that person that strings it all together and keeps the actual recovery moving forward. Because I think that's for sure. And there are eating disorder specialist therapists as well, but it is just natural that when you're in therapy, there's a lot of therapy to unfold. And so what you're offering is, I'm sure, therapeutic in many ways, but it is more of the coaching, is what's the next step? What's the next challenge to move forward?
It's all behavior change and mindset change. So we are looking at your behaviors and asking, how can we challenge this behavior or change this behavior in a small, manageable way? I am a recovery coach. I am not a basketball coach. I am not going to push you to your limits. I'm going to gently nudge you towards a place where you feel like it's manageable for you, because I don't want you to burn out of recovery. Recovery is so hard. So it's gentle nudges towards recovery every single week. And I kind of read you to see what you're ready for. We talk about what you're ready for, what you think you can manage at that time. And I incorporate a lot of patience in the process. Like, it's not a fast process. It's a growth process. And we want sustainable long-term change. So that's what I work with my clients towards.
Absolutely. And I love that you can, just say like, hey, this is for the long-term change. This is having patience. And I can tell, Meg, you're such a patient person. I'm sure that your clients just love working with you because of how understanding you are, and having walked through it yourself too. I think that must just really guide all of your clients in such a powerful way.
Oh, thank you. Yes, I like to hope that when they come to me, they feel a sense of relief. They're taking action, they're facing their fears every day, but it's not a high pressure situation. Like, you now have more support. I'm holding your hand. We can work towards your recovery in a way that makes you feel safe and comfortable to move forward.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Love it. Not a basketball coach.
And also another thing I want to note is that I just created the Radiant Recovery Collective this year, which I'm so proud of. It's a much more accessible way to have coaching. If you don't have the resources for one-on-one coaching, what the Radiant Recovery Collective is a membership. So if you join this membership, you actually can do group coaching with me once a month, but we also have a dietitian doing monthly sessions. We have a yoga informed therapist on board. Then I also bring guests and professionals and like recovery role models on to do a workshop every month. So there's a lot for very affordable price. You can get a lot of really amazing content, and also that community behind recovery, which is huge, especially for those who feel like their eating disorder isolates them, or they feel really alone, or they've lost those relationships because their eating disorder is in the way. If you join the collective, everyone there understands to some degree what you're going through. So it's a very magical place. I'm very proud of the collective as well.
I love it. And it's so wonderful because one-on-one coaching is so needed to get the individual attention that you need to move your life and your recovery forward. And then having more of a group setting and kind of that continuous ongoing support as well is also critically important, to not feel isolated, not feel alone in something when you're certainly not. So that's beautiful that you've developed that and are offering that to your clients as well. That's so amazing, Meg. Well, Meg, this has been an awesome conversation, and I think we can wrap it up with some rapid fire questions that
Oh,
I
okay.
ask a lot of ask a lot of my guests. They're just fun. If there is one food that you could eat every single day for the rest of your life but never get sick of it, what would that food be?
Wow. That's a really good question. The first thing that came to mind was cheesecake. Cheesecake's a huge part of my recovery journey. It was like the first food I really wanted to eat at breaking my diet rules. So definitely cheesecake. And I don't know if I would ever get sick of it. I don't think I would. I don't
I
know.
love it.
If I had the whole Cheesecake Factory menu and I could choose new ones every single day, I don't think I'd get sick of it.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So many choices. So many choices. How could you get sick of that?
Yeah, yeah.
And that's the key, right? There's a lot of foods that we think we want to eat every single day, but then like we do get sick of them eventually.
Yeah. And
No, that's the key. Which one would you not get sick of?
and I do say to my clients too, because they have this fear that if they allow themselves to eat something, they're never going to stop. You know, like, I'm afraid if I allow myself to eat cheesecake every day, I'll just never stop. And it's this big anxious thought. But really, in reality, your body is going to start craving fresh food like veggies and salads and things like that. There's a natural balance that occurs. So
There absolutely is. If you do eat cheesecake every single day for the rest of your life, you're also going to start craving a salad.
yes.
Yeah. And then you have the choice, right? You don't have to eat cheesecake every single day for the rest of your life. Now you have the choice. Do I want the cheesecake or do I want the salad? But beautiful. So cheesecake, especially with Cheesecake Factory's menu, many options, and we really won't get sick of it.
Yeah.
And Meg, now that you are in a place where you do exercise and can rediscover that in your life, is there a sport that's your favorite to participate in?
I don't know if this is really considered a sport. Well, I guess it is. Dancing.
Yeah.
Definitely my favorite. But freestyle dancing, no choreography, just me and the music. I could dance all day and never get sick of it. Probably. It's my favorite thing.
So much.
And I would eat food to nourish my body, but also keep dancing. Like, because I'm the type of person you have to drag off the dance floor. Like, you cannot get me off. So I love dancing. I miss it so much. With COVID, I haven't been able to go to Zumba classes. So I have withdrawals from not being able to dance.
You know, you just got to push aside your furniture in the living room and go for it.
It's not the same, but I know you're right.
Yeah, that's awesome. So dance is your number one sport. What about to watch? Do you like to, as a spectator sport, what's your favorite spectator?
Very good question. I love watching swim competitions, like swim races. And then I really do weirdly enjoy watching like downhill skiing. That's really fun for me. I really like watching golf. I did golf in high school also, and I wasn't very good at it, wasn't competitive at all. Very strange how I'm not super competitive with stuff. But I really loved golf, so it's fun for me to watch golf. First, it's very relaxing, beautiful scenery.
I agree. When I worked at the University of Georgia, I worked very closely with the golf teams, and it was like one of my favorite things as their dietitian, but it was one of my favorite things was to like go to golf practice or go to their competitions. I loved being out on the course with the girls and gals that were playing, and I loved watching the competition of it because it was such this delicate balance of like intensity and competitiveness with just like peace and serenity. And it's actually a really interesting spectator sport. Yeah.
It really is. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah. My final question for you, Meg, is there a female athlete that you really are inspired by?
Ooh, wow. I am going to plug my college team, the UConn women's basketball team. I will always be inspired by them. I guess specific player wise, back growing up, I was really inspired by Diana Taurasi, who was a basketball player at UConn. I met her because my dad actually worked at ESPN. So I met her at a meet and greet once as a kid. So that was really cool.
Wow.
But while as a coach, it's funny. I think I try to channel the UConn women's basketball team and how victorious they are and how they're just these undeniable champions. So I try to channel that energy when I need some confidence. So shout out to them. Love them.
I love that. The entire team is just an inspirational team of female athletes. I love it. And I'm cracking up at what you said earlier when you're talking about how you do your recovery coaching. You're like, I'm not a basketball coach, but maybe in some ways you are.
I think about the basketball team a lot. You really did a good job connecting that.
It's hilarious. So you find that balance coaching your clients of having patience, but knowing when they need a little bit of inspiration. And
basically, I need a basketball coach for my life.
I love it. I love it. Yeah. Well, Meg, thank you so much for sharing your story, sharing your amazing work that you do with our listeners, and for spending your time on this podcast this evening or this day. It was really great to chat with you.
You're very welcome. It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me. And I just appreciate the opportunity to be here. So thank you, and have a great afternoon yourself.
Thanks. Oh, one more thing I almost forgot, but where can our listeners find you or follow you if they'd like to?
Yes, they can follow me at meg-mccabe.com. And then also I have an Instagram account, which is meg_McCabe. And then also, if you're interested in the collective, it's just on Instagram at Radiant Recovery Collective. So please follow me if this episode connects with you. I'll be thrilled to have you there.
Wonderful. Thank you, Meg.
You're very welcome.
I really hope you enjoyed that episode, and thanks for listening. But before I let you go, I have free resources that you can have access to right away, right now, so that you can start fueling your body as a fierce, fit, and fueled female athlete. First, I have your Red S recovery race. If you've ever wondered if you might be struggling with Red S, curious to learn more, or know you have Red S and are looking to recover fast, then you can head to www.riseupnutritionrun.com/RedS and download the Red S Recovery Race. See how you place and figure out the next steps to recovery. Plus, while there, I have a few other great resources for you, including 3 nutrition secrets that every elite athlete swears by, and access to our private Facebook community, Female Athlete Nutrition. So again, to gain access to all of this, head to riseupnutritionrun.com/RedS. That's /REDS. And you can gain access and get the help you need fast. Too many girls and women and female athletes struggle with nutrition, but you don't have to any longer. Become fierce, fit, and fueled. Links in the show notes, and I'll see you next time.